Welcome to Bitcoin Brunch, Bitcoin news, education, and commentary. We pull it all together so you don't have to. Curating the latest Bitcoin news and topics that you need to know about. Hi, I'm Alicia, host of Bitcoin Brunch. This is episode number 1 for the week of August 15th, 2024. This first episode may be a bit choppy as I begin to sort myself out here in this podcast format, but I felt it was important to have an audible component that coincides with my brunch brief. The brunch brief number 1 is the first article which was published on X. The brunch brief is a concise written article for those who prefer to read, and this podcast here is the audio component for those who prefer to listen, which I call the brunch break, as I'm hoping when you take a small coffee break from work or maybe during workouts, you'll listen in to catch up on the latest Bitcoin news and commentary. I know you're busy, and the world is very busy these days, and my aim is to inform you and keep you up to date with all that's going on and keep you in the Bitcoin loop. Just going to grab my cup of coffee here and get right to our snapshot of the past week or so. This past week started with a bit of unease as the market was recovering from a rapid dump of Bitcoin fueled by the Japan yen carry trades in early August. Japan's unexpected rate raise forced traders to sell off anything they could get their hands on to cover the rate change. Bitcoin plummeted nearly 20% to a low of just over $49,000 US. The good news is the low was tested and Bitcoin rebounded to over $60,000 by the end of last week. This week, Bitcoin started out well enough, but then quickly fell down and then rising up again. The recent intense volatility in Bitcoin was due to Japan's unexpected monetary policy moves, which instigated the sudden drop and lingering fluctuations. Yet this event confirmed a significant and unique trade of Bitcoin, which I believe needs to be pointed out and highlighted. With banks and many exchanges closed, Bitcoin was there. As traders hunted for liquidity, Bitcoin was essentially the only available asset on that Sunday. And Bitcoin proved its superpower as the hardest asset available, anytime, any day, anywhere on Earth. I am reminded of a recent quote by the CEO of Strike, Jack Mallers. In crises, markets sell what they can, not what they want. In other important recent happenings, MetaPlanet buys 500 million yen worth in Bitcoin. Japan's MetaPlanet is taking a page from MicroStrategy's blueprint for companies that want to invest in Bitcoin. MetaPlanet recently bought an additional 500 million yen worth of Bitcoin for their reserves and now holds over 300 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. I think they must have watched Michael Saylor's keynote presentation at the recent Bitcoin conference, where he lays out his corporate Bitcoin strategy. If you happen to catch his presentation, you see he breaks out his template strategy for how to invest in Bitcoin for both individuals and corporations. He names those who invest 80% of their treasury maxis, those who convert 100% with 5% equity issued double maxis, and those with 100% converted and 10% debt issued triple maxis. You can watch Michael's presentation on YouTube or read his presentation in full on his website, michael.com. I wonder which base MetaPlanet is aiming for, Bitcoin Maxi, double, or triple. Several other companies of note are making strategic moves right now with Bitcoin. Another company following suit and in the news recently was Marathon. Marathon Miner proposes offering to purchase $250 million for Bitcoin. Marathon actually ended up securing $300 million with an oversubscribed offering of convertible senior notes. Marathon Digital Holdings CEO Fred Thiel announced last week that Mara now holds over 25,000 Bitcoin in their reserves. Marathon is one of the largest publicly traded Bitcoin miners. Fred Thiel believes in having Bitcoin as a strategic reserve for his balance sheet, following the suit of Michael Saylor. I imagine it's likely there will be many more companies making Bitcoin moves like this in the year ahead. Not only is Mara keen on adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet, they also announced their commitment to Bitcoin and will stamp Made in USA onto every block they mine. Thiel said Marathon is the only large-scale miner who can do this because we run our own pool and ensure that all the blocks mined by Marapool are made in USA. It's like engraving a name onto a stone monument like the Code of Hammurabi. Everyone in the world can see who mined the block as it's now embedded into the code on the blockchain evermore. I believe in today's environment of feisty politics, it's admirable that Marathon is not shy to be a proud American company at the forefront of the Bitcoin revolution. That is the title of Saylor's keynote presentation, by the way, the Bitcoin Revolution, as we are witnessing a paradigm shift in money and revolution in real time. Bitcoin is the 6th top monetary asset in the world. I saw a chart this week, which I listed in my Bitcoin Brief article, and this chart shows the top monetary assets in the world, with gold, USD, and the EU at the top of the list. The interesting thing was that Bitcoin was listed as the 6th top asset in the world. Not bad for the new kid on the block. It's not a surprise, but just more evidence that Bitcoin is more than a mere cryptocurrency, and definitely something you need to understand better. Bitcoin is often referred to as digital gold as an easy way to explain it, but it's far more than an uneditable piece of code on the blockchain. The total global wealth is estimated to be at over $900 trillion. And although Bitcoin currently holds a relatively small piece of the total global wealth, Bitcoin now represents nearly 20% of the value of US dollars and more than 8% of the value of all the gold. Increasingly, both people and institutions are choosing to hold Bitcoin as the asset to preserve capital. The realization of the future digital AI world swirls all around us, and with that, it becomes more clear every day that in our near future, it is likely inevitable that an AI-guided algorithm will want to be paid in Bitcoin, the hardest, scarcest digital asset indigenous to its system. If you were an AI, what would you want to be paid in for your work? Another quote by Jack Mallers: Bitcoin gives everyone in the world property rights secured by mathematics. It is the first monetary asset we've been able to engineer with no natural issuer. A monetary asset secured by mathematics is likely what AI will gravitate towards, don't you think? With that in mind, it's no wonder Bitcoin is making its way up the charts as one of the top monetary assets in the world. Major Bitcoin acquisitions happening on all fronts. Not only have public companies been adding to their balance sheets, but banks have been making big moves into the asset. Some big banks have been buying into Bitcoin ETFs, while other banks have been busy buying shares of public companies like MicroStrategy, who own a lot of Bitcoin on their balance sheets, as a proxy investment for Bitcoin. Goldman Sachs recently bought over $400 million in Bitcoin ETFs, allocating over $238 million to iShares IBIT, over $79 million to Fidelity FBTC, and more than $35 million to Grayscale GBTC, among others. Morgan Stanley, with over $1.3 trillion in assets, recently bought $187 million in Bitcoin ETF holdings. Recently, Norwegian Central Bank bought over 1 million shares, and Swiss Central Bank bought almost 500,000 shares of publicly traded MicroStrategy. It appears banks worldwide are quietly adding Bitcoin to their stashes through ETFs or proxy. Here is a list of the top holders across various groups. Top public company Bitcoin holders include MicroStrategy, Marathon Digital Holdings, and Tesla. Together, they hold more than 257,000 Bitcoin. Top country government Bitcoin holders include the United States, China, and the UK. Together, they hold more than 462,000 Bitcoin. Top private company Bitcoin holders include Mt. Gox, Block One, and Tether Holdings. Together, they hold more than 415,000 Bitcoin. And a look at the top spot Bitcoin ETFs include IBIT, GBTC, and FBTC. Together, the top ETFs hold more than 757,000 Bitcoin. These 12 companies and institutions altogether hold a combined 9% of the total available 21 million Bitcoin. Banks, funds, and companies are taking a look down the road and investing in Bitcoin. Knowing this, we can't help but take a look at our individual savings and asset allocation. This leads us to the question, what are your assets and are they recession-proof? Listen to the All In podcast, episode 191, a week or so ago, which is always a good exchange and where I plug into the beat of the latest polyfintech news. They were discussing the Japanese yen carry trade reverberation. David Sachs said, I don't think we know all of the bad news yet. Not many people had on their radar the Japan yen carry trades until it happened. How many more things are there out there like that? This week, the new CPI inflation rate fell to 2.9%, indicating a rate cut might be on the horizon. It's difficult to see much relief ahead with still high fuel costs, grocery receipts, insurance, and rent bills. In today's spinning news cyclone, there certainly is a lot to take in. The volatility seems innate at this point to our digital future. Spikes aren't good, and with the upcoming U.S. presidential election, it appears only bigger waves are on the horizon. As we experience the vibrations from the world's monetary news and policies, it's prudent to ask the question, are your assets recession-proof? When you start to think about it and evaluate available assets, real estate, gold, bonds, equities, Bitcoin, you begin to wonder what asset is recession-proof and how long will my money be preserved? Again, if you haven't seen Saylor's presentation, he goes in depth comparing the long-term value and return of various assets through history. It's really very interesting. And with Bitcoin making astronomical strides up the chart of top assets in the world, the question you have to ask yourself is, are you going to beat Bitcoin? Green Candle Investments recently interviewed Strike CEO Jack Mallers. Jack said his treasury business grew on average over the last decade 63% year over year. Jack's Bitcoin holdings outperform most people and most other businesses. When you create or build things that have value, you improve the world. Jack believes companies that are profitable not only fulfill a financial obligation, but a moral obligation and make the world a better place. After listening to this interview, it left me thinking about one of the most fascinating aspects of Bitcoin. Once you begin to understand Bitcoin, it changes the way you look at everything. The only thing I can compare it to is having a baby. There is before, and as every parent knows, and then there is after, where everything changes. The way you look at the world changes, even the light changes. Bitcoin changes the way you look at the world. Bitcoin changes the way you think about your time, your work, your effort, and what it's all worth. So again, the only question is, can you beat Bitcoin? What is the rate of return on your capital? If you or your company are not outperforming Bitcoin, then it's time to evaluate where your time and money are spent. Elon and Trump talk, no news. How could I not mention the recent conversation between Elon Musk and Donald Trump on X? I waited online with a million other people for about 40 minutes, hanging on to see if the internet actually broke. Despite a long wait and a few minor glitches, I was able to listen in fine. Overall, I thought it was pivotal to have an open-ended conversation live in real time on one of the largest platforms in the world. Just like I thought it was also pivotal to have both Trump and RFK Jr., presidential candidates, speaking at the Bitcoin conference a few weeks ago. I think most people welcome any opportunity to gain insight into any political candidate's thoughts and philosophy. The discussion between Elon and Trump was good, and talks like these should happen more often by every candidate. But the headline here for me was, no news, because there was zero talk about Bitcoin or crypto, and I think that is probably a good thing. Okay, so now let's do something fun, Bitcoin math. If you invested $1,000 into Bitcoin 1 year ago, it would now be worth $2,063 US. And if you invested $1,000 into Bitcoin 5 years ago, it would now be worth $6,068 US. If you invested $1,000 into Bitcoin 10 years ago, it would now be worth $118,883 US. Thanks for listening to my brunch break, where I aim to keep you in the Bitcoin loop. If you enjoyed our brunch break, then grab a cup of coffee with me next time, and follow Bitcoin Brunch on X for daily, weekly updates. Rise and shine, everyone, and have a brilliant day. This is Alicia with Bitcoin Brunch. The Brunch Brief is provided for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not offered or intended to be used as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice.